Hello and welcome to the Idifico Insights podcast. Today I have a very special guest with me. Her name is Taylor McGill and she happens to be my niece. And so Taylor is going to tell us all about studying architecture. She is currently a fourth year student at Washington State University, and like in the long haul is toward the end of the program, so she's just gonna fill us in on everything she's been doing, and we'll talk about kind of, what does the future of architecture look like. So it's going to be a great conversation. Taylor, welcome to the Idifico podcast.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Okay, so Taylor, what initially drew you to architecture, and how has your perspective on the field evolved throughout your undergrad studies?
Yeah, it was during COVID, right? I was in high school during COVID, and I was taking some like horticulture and floriculture classes, which was just like studying plants and kind of getting the depths of that. And then I started to look at what landscape architecture meant, especially because where I was working at the time, my boss's partner was an owner of a landscape firm. And so I kind of
Mm,
got interested in that world. And then I
mhm,
actually went out and met him for a while. And then I realized landscape architecture does not sound fun for me.
mm,
And so
mm.
then I started getting more into like design and then starting to read a little bit more books. And I had a lot more time on my hands because of COVID and school was
Right.
online. So I started to get more into like what I thought architecture meant. And
Hmm.
then when I started to get into the program, I realized that architecture school is very much different than like the profession itself. And so it was more about
Hmm.
developing ideas and like that was something very new to me, especially within the design sense. And so it challenged me a lot more than probably any other like uh, like major would. And so I
Mm.
started to get very interested in like this competition with my own self in like a development way. So that's kind of how it changed.
Okay. And so initially, what did you think architecture meant versus then what you learned that it means?
Just buildings, just trying to
Hmm.
find cool buildings, like
Yep.
like you look at something and you're like, that's cool. And then you, when you're not understanding design concepts, the you don't know why a lot of the times. And
Yeah.
so then you get into school and you're like, oh, this is why. Like there's meanings within meetings and like it's just it's fun.
Mm. Yeah. I love that. I love that. So, like so now like looking toward the future, kind of what areas of architecture are you most interested in, and like what do you want to study more of? Because I know you want to get your grad degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love like underfunded areas.
Mm,
So there's a lot of developers that come in and kind of wipe out the culture and the community that's already there. And I just
mm,
think that's very damaging. And
mm,
there's no point besides to make money. And so while I'm trying to stay away from like the politics of that, but there's something that about design of respecting a community,
mm,
especially underfunded areas that just really I find interesting.
mm. Help me understand underfunded and what that means to you.
Yeah, so I mean there's like examples. So Lake Union is something that I'm working one of my projects is in right now. And Lake Union way back then was pretty underfunded and then a bunch of land got sold to like Paul, like from Paul Allen, and there's like this whole thing. This developer kind of took over the land and kind of created this urban fabric that is very disconnected. And while I'm
Mm,
not saying Lake Union had a very deep community then, but it's one of
right.
those things where it's like a lot of people lost what was originally there just so that this new and improved, or well, what people believe is new and improved, come to be.
Hmm.
So underfunded
Hmm.
areas is just those that are like that aren't like very eye-catching
Hmm.
to the rich is kind of what happens.
Yeah. So what do you okay, so um stepping back and maybe thinking about like what is like how do you do economic development without like doing that to a community?
Yeah. It's one of those things. Like gentrification is just so popular.
Mm.
And it's one of those things where it's like maybe we as designers should look at what it means to add such a building because half the time designers don't really get a choice. We get like a task.
That's right.
And so there's one of those things where it's like, what can the client that we have, like, what can they afford? So it's like, how can we still incorporate the community, but also like completing the task? So it's
Hmm.
one of those things where now it's like you just got to balance it. And while I haven't had my own clients, like I've had internships, but it's not to an extent of like being a licensed architect. But it's one of those things where it's like we need to just keep having those ideas and um, development in mind. Just
Hmm.
keep pushing for community.
That's right. Yeah. And I think like knowing that your voice matters in the process and but it definitely is challenging once you get into an organization. Um, and you know, that is the current career trajectory usually, right? Like you go and you like then you're mentored by whomever, you know, you're working under and you kind of get lost in that like task as you're calling it, right? Tell us about your internships.
Yeah, I worked in my hometown because I needed to keep some of my other jobs that I have at night. And so I worked for um, the Army, actually. I got employed by
Mm-hmm.
the Army and then stationed at USACE, so like the Army Corps.
Yeah.
And I then, it's a very different world, I will say. The
Mm-hmm.
federal versus private sector, it's very different. And the rules are different. So it was very nice to go more in depth about like learning code, learning how to draw details, some things that I just don't learn like within school. And
Sure.
then also, I was paid by the Army, but employed by like the district. So the freedom which is confusing,
Yeah, when you say district, like what does that mean?
so
Like what?
there's districts of the Army Corps,
Okay.
and that's,
Okay.
yeah. So I worked at a district, but the people who were paying me was the Army itself.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
so like the district got to do a little bit more freedom with what I could do. So I actually got to bring in a lot more things that aren't typically within their realm. So I'm rendering, I'm showing more 3D conceptualized items that their design process never really has. And,
Mm.
and so it was more about what I could add to the team instead of what I could do for them, which was a very, in my opinion, distinct between other people that had
Hmm.
internships. So that was pretty nice.
That was
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
experience. I love that. Um, so so as far as like a grad program, so I'm not really familiar with like after you get your bachelor's in architecture, like how do you like what programs are there sort of like lines of education you can go into?
So a little bit about like the bachelor's degree. Some are accredited and some aren't, in
Mm,
a sense of to get your like license.
right.
So while WSU is accredited, I still would have to get my master's to like be accredited within that, which is, yeah. And
Okay.
so going on to a master's program helps me get the hours I need, like the certificates I need to start like taking those tests and stuff like that, getting my hours, professional hours. But so yeah, so it's just finding places that you have to have accreditation in so that you can
Hmm.
actually move forward and then just keep developing.
Okay, and so what areas are you looking to get accreditation in?
It's just an overall like architectural degree,
Okay.
but like the grad schools, all of them specialize in different things. So you have something like UW, which is really more about like the urban fabric, like how you're taking like the environment and like the city and kind of what that means, like urban planning and stuff. And something like University of Oregon, like they're more like home invested, trying to do mass housing, stuff like that, in a very
Mm-hmm.
respectful way that isn't just like Hayden Homes or like something where it's fast and cheap.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That makes me a little sad for UW and maybe explains Lake Union, perhaps. Maybe? I don't know. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So, as far as the tools you use, like you're part of a generation that's grown up with like advanced tools, right? Like you know how to use technology. So, how does this influence your approach to design compared to like what you feel previous generations as, what are the differences that you see?
Yeah, I think comparing it to past generations, there's kind of accessibility was one of the newer topics, and
Hmm.
like incorporating that and kind of the codes and rules that accessibility brought. And now we're getting into a day like where sustainability is starting to, we have rules about that, we have codes.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always just grown up with like, yeah, that should be in a building. Like, why wouldn't we have something that's accessible for everybody? Why wouldn't we create a building that isn't harmful for the environment? And so
Right.
it's one of those things where it's like there's so many people that it's like new, like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? But for me, it's like I'm just learning things that I'm going to use.
Uh-huh.
Or like this is what's the world is like, why aren't we like why is it still pushed back? Why are we still trying to like break the rules in some areas? It's kind
Yeah.
of
Uh, I often find myself in a really interesting place because I'm, as you know, I'm not an architect, but I've served on several different city task forces where we're talking about these things. And I often find myself explaining one side to the other and trying to like find common ground there. And so I think, I mean, just in thinking about this question of like why, I think I'll just share that developers like at the end of the day there are dollars that they're putting into it and like they just can't necessarily do that for free, right? And like and so when you put too many barriers in place, the building doesn't get built, then the housing doesn't happen, right? So you have to find common ground amongst those. I'm sure you're nodding like, yep, that's yeah. I guess that would be kind of just the thought. But then on the other hand, it's like, yeah, we're gonna create a building that makes sure that every human can access it. You don't want to, make it impossible for everyone. So, yeah, I think just thinking that through a little bit. But that's interesting. So like accessibility and when you say accessibility, I that's what I'm getting from what you're saying is like ADA
yes,
and like just things that just
yeah.
exist for humans. Um, okay. And then as far as like tools like AutoCAD and things like that, like what do you use on the daily?
It's kind of, I am also a teaching assistant, so I have to use a
Okay.
lot more than what typically fourth years use. Right now, mainly in my classes, it's Revit, which is a
Mm,
pretty obvious one. Rhino is also in there. That one's a little more free-form design. SketchUp is what I'm teaching currently to our first years, where we're
mm-hmm.
getting to the steps we're starting SketchUp, and that one it's a nice starter, I would say. There's a lot of firms out there that use SketchUp and stuff like that. But definitely Revit is somewhere where in the professional world, I've used a lot more
Mm-hmm.
than Rhino and SketchUp.
Okay. What's Rhino? I'm not familiar with it.
Rhino, it's relatively the same as it's kind of like SketchUp, but in a sense where it's like you're drawing the lines and extruding them yourself to create
Okay.
walls. And you can do like Revit is more of like you draw a line and it's a wall already.
Uh-huh.
So it's a little bit more steps, but your freedom, you have a lot more freedom within the program. It's just 3D designing software.
Sure. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. But then also like Adobe Cloud, Illustrator, Photoshop, that's also super important to renders and getting communication across.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you see technology changing some of those things for the future?
Oh, I mean, it already has. There's so many things where that I saw in my internship where they're just not used to it. Like they're still trying to use like they would call it the old ways.
Mm-hmm.
But like renderings, designing 3D was also one of the newer items. They wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
design, they would just draw sheets and
Mm-hmm.
then create that. And it's just more of like, well, we're not looking at the plans like three-dimensional, like you're still just looking at it 2D. And so I
Mm-hmm.
do think like we're gonna start getting more 3D, like the VR. There's VR designing now. I don't
Yeah.
know if I could personally do it with how motion sick I get, but yeah.
Um,
But I there's something there where it's starting to evolve as to designing within the virtual world, but it's still like this 3D element that we believe we can see.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be cool. I do think we're going to see a lot of disruption in architecture. It's just, I think because of these tools that are coming out, it's going to be, it's going to be hard on some people.
It's gonna, yeah, it's there's gonna be a divide, I will say. There's
You think so?
oh, I mean I already saw it in my internship, like there's just change is hard in
Yeah,
general. And it's
it
one of
is.
those things where it's like architecture is it's going to be affected by these developments, especially with how fast they're developing.
Right.
Um, but it's just one of those things you got to embrace it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Are you guys talking about it in your program?
There's we probably have a lecture once a week about AI
Mm,
specifically.
okay.
Last semester it was more about digital tools. So like
Hmm.
VR, like kind of that. But
Hmm.
this semester it's really been more about how people feel about AI and professionals. Like we're bringing people in to talk about it.
Hmm. Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, yeah, I think colleges are really struggling to figure out how to navigate this, but I'm glad that at least for architecture, I think it's not totally cut and dry, but I think a lot of it is baked in already. And so it's easy to see where there's going to be disruption and like filling you in on that so that you're not wasting a bunch of time studying something that is non-existent any longer, and at the same time like understanding that like where we're at today is because of those things,
Mhm.
and so wanting to sort of honor the past too. There are a lot of different ways to look through it. um okay, let's see. So okay, we already moved into that. How do you see the intersection of technology and architecture evolving during your career? Okay, so you're at the beginning. You like predict the future in 15 years. How is it different than today?
It's it's I mean, it's one of those things where I hate putting myself in a box in a sense like if I predict the future, I probably will believe it until I proven wrong.
Hmm.
But it's one of those things where it's like I was talking to someone who came in. I can't remember what firm they were from, but they were talking and they were like, 5 years ago, we did not learn about like sustainability or about lead or like
Hmm.
anything like that. And I just like that realization was just kind of crazy to me because I was like that's all we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Like that's like it's been a part of every design. It's one of those things where it's like there's gonna be something that probably we thought of, but not in the way where we should, and it's just gonna kind of hit everybody like a rock or like a big
Yeah.
boulder. Like it's gonna get in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think we are seeing that for sure.
Yeah.
um but we also have a new administration, and it seems like they're hell bent on like removing any of those those requirements. So we'll see what happens. To me, yeah. I don't know if lead is going to go by the wayside in the side in the same way that DEI is, but like uh and they're not the same program obviously, but like everything that the development community has talked about over the last 5 years is associated with you know you're going for the platinum, right? That's what everybody's looking for, or so they say,
Yeah.
like, so it's
it
it's interesting.
it's pretty funny, I would say, learning about it, especially in school, compared to being in the, professional world. Like lead is just something that happens when you follow code.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So it's really funny that there's a lot of buildings putting like plaques up and stuff like that because
Mm-hmm.
it's an achievement to like move in the future in a sense of like having great buildings. But it's one of those things where it's like that's what everything should be from now on.
Yeah.
So, but the
Yeah.
plaques are always fun to read. So,
They are. Have you walked Seattle at all and looked at all the
yeah.
plaques? Yeah. Yeah. I think they are too. Okay, which project have you worked on that's challenged you the most, and what did it teach you about your strengths and interests in architecture?
It's that's one of those things where it's like every project that you're currently on is your hardest.
Yeah.
And so right now, like I'm in my capstone, I have a group of 8 working on
Hmm.
one project together, which I've never had that many people on one project in school at
Mm-hmm.
least. And we're all so used to like this individual design status that now we have to work all together. It's a lot of the ideas like get lost or get like changed. And as a designer, you kind of have to be used to that change. But a lot of us as students aren't ready to give up that individuality aspect, or that's what it
Mm-hmm.
seems. Um, so it's one of those things where it's hard. I've spent some sleepless nights already, and it's February, so
Yeah. What is the like the end result? What will you produce as a team of 8 at the end?
yeah. So we're doing a podium design. So we're designing the first 2 floors completely, and then we're basically doing a facade or skin design for the rest.
Okay.
And it's going to be a 7-story office building in the
Hmm.
Canyon.
Okay.
And we, just to dive in a little bit about my projects, we're doing kind of like a multicultural market on that podium. And we're doing a building kind of about cuts and rises to go with like how a market operates and giving respect to the lake that's there. That's because we're about, I don't know, 100 feet away from the lake, I think.
Okay.
So, yeah.
There is a similar development actually in Seattle. Are you familiar with it?
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
there is. So
there's,
this one was developed by Skanska for Tommy Bahama, and the bottom is a market. And it was they were, so this was pre-COVID, when there wasn't a struggle with, office and money and all of those things. And so they intentionally built in like community, like little flower shop and little like locally owned donut shop and, like things like that. And one of the restaurants there has the most amazing crab rolls. In fact, brought grandma and grandpa there. And they argued because grandpa couldn't hear what grandma wanted.
yeah,
And so, of course he got more shit than like he should have because she was like, I said I wanted this. And he came back with something else. It was good though. She was happy in the end. She was happy in
that's all that matters.
Um, so, um, anyway, we'll have to jet up there at some point when you're here next.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that it sounds like and it's kind of fascinating to me that there's such a focus on Lake Union.
Yes. Our client is Vulcan, which is
Yeah,
the developer up there. Yeah.
sure.
So
Yep.
there's a lot of items where we were supposed to use 100% of the space, which is
Hmm.
basically like you're making the box is what
Right.
occurs. And so our professors kind of fought back and now we get to remove 25%. So a
Okay.
lot of our ideas, in a sense of the entire class, we get to do a lot more with it. And so we're trying to have this last like capstone in a sense where we're still students. None of this like will be built because we're students. We can use that creativity. Like we can, even though we got a budget, like we don't have to listen to it right now.
So are you saying that Vulcan is actually like that they will they be the ones who choose the winner of the capstone?
I believe either they choose it or they have a really big say.
Because just so you know, they do use those.
Yes.
Like like
Yeah.
like NAOP does an annual competition. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I know that UW is a huge part of it, and then I think it's always like an organ. And maybe it's OSU.
Yeah.
And then there's like always one other school. Maybe it is Wazoo, but I feel like it isn't.
Mm.
Anyway, they do this every year, like similar contest, and it's always like private, or it's always like land that actually does need to be built on. So that's interesting. And so what is your scope in the
It changes every week.
okay, cool.
Say there's we so this project, this exact site, I believe it's been the same for the past 5 years, if not more. I'm
Mhm.
not sure. But it's the same site, it's the same requirements, podium, office, and the land that we're trying to add to is currently a parking lot. That
Okay,
used to be a building that they tore down to do a parking lot in to hold a spot for like a building. At least that's the story we were told.
I see.
So it's one of those things where it's like maybe they do, maybe they keep it a parking lot.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Parking, that's a whole another can of worms. What do you think about parking in general?
It's one of those things where we as designers constantly get rid of it. And there's a lot of I don't know if they're excuses, but it's like, oh, but there's a bus stop. Like you're
Right.
fine, there's a bus stop. But it's one of those things where it's like I think Seattle is starting to really develop their transportation and kind of amplify like safety and just like locations and stuff like that. But there's a lot of towns that aren't. And so it's very hard to start to get rid of that parking when it's not fully safe in that environment. But also, if we keep doing parking lots, we'll never stop buying cars. So it's one of those things where it's like it has to happen. It's gonna be rough for a bit, but the alternative is just, keep worsening the emissions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is one of these things where you just have to be realistic. I mean, in the city of Tacoma, we talked about it so much, and it's like Tacoma is still just a driving town. Like you drive places, everyone does. Like, but but the parking, and so yeah, you've got to put it somewhere. But like I think about New York so much because of that transit system. I mean, it's if like I know that people get hurt on it, and like I'm telling you, the last time I was on it, I'll tell you offline. It was a very scary experience, to be honest. Like people came in, turned on their radio, like it was a bad deal. Um, but I also feel like it's absolutely miraculous that you can like get on the train in Manhattan and be in Brooklyn for $2.
Yeah.
You just hold your phone up to the thing, and it's like Seattle, I feel like is so far behind. Like we're never going to be there. We're never going to be there. Like that for the underground situation. Like what they're building now is above ground, right? So and they're trying, and it is genuinely happening up north. It's not here in Tacoma yet, but um yeah, I was going to lunch with a friend in Bellevue, and I was like, it would be so awesome if we could just hop on a train and be there. And, even if it takes long, I don't care. Like, it's just nice to not have to be driving and worrying about parking.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I don't know. Yeah. So, anyway. Okay. So, grad program. Well, we've talked about this a little bit, but you like, Seems like you're leaning toward Oregon.
That might just because I got accepted a couple weeks ago.
Oh, did you? Well,
You
congratulations.
know?
That's awesome. Okay.
I definitely, so I applied to four, UW, Oregon, and then Colorado and WSU.
Mm-hmm.
And so each school has its own like place in my heart in some sense. WSU, like I've been here forever, but I will say it's like I feel like it's my time to move on.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people here where it's like, hey, there's opportunities, like, teaching assistant, I can keep going. There's research, stuff like that. But it's one of those things where it's like for my development, I want to see other items.
Yeah.
Definitely the location of each is just very important. So it's like, I have family, there's like connections in Seattle, there's stuff over there, which is that's very important. But the school itself in Oregon is really appealing to me. And then
Mm-hmm.
Colorado as well, they have a lot of urban planning, yet still like community focused
Mm-hmm.
design. And it's going to be a hard choice if more items come about. But
Yeah.
definitely the lean is probably because I'm still very psyched about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And exciting. And which city is OSU in?
Oh,
Is
it's not OSU, it's University of
Oh, it's
Oregon.
oh, sorry.
You
Okay.
Yeah.
Eugene. Okay. So it's still far
Yeah.
from us. But okay. Okay, which firms inspire you and how do they influence your career aspirations?
It's hard because there's just so many that are very inspiring. The most recent I've been really interested in Integris. So
Okay.
they're based out of Spokane and Seattle. And I can't remember if they have more. But they do a lot of community-based things. So
They do.
like yeah, on their lunch breaks, like they go out into the community and sort of like ask questions. They do like pavilions, like or like stands that like continue to move. They do volunteer work on certain days, and that's just very appealing, especially because while their designs, like they might be doing libraries and stuff that is more privatized or more client based, they're still like making a like they're still going out to the community. And that's
Yeah.
one thing that a lot of firms don't do. There's also Perkinson and Will. They're kind of all over, which is very
Yeah.
nice. There's a lot. I'm trying to get my ECC, which is like Energy Conscious Certificate from WSU.
Okay.
There's a
Nice.
lot. Yeah, I'm studying a lot of their buildings. So a lot
Uh-huh.
of their buildings, like they're using that modular design, especially in things that aren't typical. Like there's this 23-story tower in San Diego that they're working on that they unitize the kitchen and
Mm.
bathrooms. But
Mm.
they use certain like connections that were just very different, and that's something that you don't see when that much money's in it. Because they're
Mm-hmm.
just like, well, I just want a building. Like, why are you trying so hard? But it's one of those things where it's like you're like they're really just trying to push for that sustainability or just like the new, which is very interesting to watch. But then there's also places like Shorter Strom, I think I'm saying correctly. They just did a new building in Walla Walla
Okay.
called
Cool.
called Echo Lands, and or it's a winery. And when I walked
Uh-huh.
in, it's just very different from any building with Walla
Mm.
Walla. And it wasn't a Seattle company.
Yeah.
I think they're
Hmm.
in Willamette or something. And so that was just kind of inspiring to see like, oh, you can go anywhere. Like even though you're in Willamette or something like that, like there's a lot more opportunity to design other places and kind of change the like urban fabric that is starting to occur there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. A few years ago, um I felt fascinated by the way that space influences the way we feel about ourselves. I forget the name of the book that I read. It was amazing. And like, well, and one of the reasons I liked it is because it just like it proved my point, like psychologically as an architect, this woman like wrote like 500 pages on why, how important it is. And part of the reason I was inspired to do that is because moving from our Mary Lane house and then into the little house that we flipped in the South End, and like just how much the space around us affected like how we felt. And then COVID hit and it was like, what? We cannot live in
Yeah.
this little tiny house. Like it was just a bad deal all around, like everything about it. But the psychology behind it was really interesting to me. So then when I was working for briefly for a general contractor, I was tasked with finding a design build partner for the so it's the building at it like a maritime, it's like a maritime skills center that they're building at the port, but it's being run by Tacoma Public Schools. So that it's like a combination between the port and that and them. And so I had to find a design partner, and I was like, I want it to be Integris. And so I researched the CEO of Integris. His name is Brian. It's amazing architect, so thoughtful. And I emailed him about the book that I had read, because this is how I would always get people's attention as a recruiter. Like, let's talk about something actually meaningful, right? And he responded to me and he was like, how do you know about my work with her? And he was referring to the author.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, I didn't know that you worked with her, but I just thought that this was like such an interesting thing. And I just really appreciate your work and would like to work with you. And so he and I met for coffee like 3 times. They did end up partnering with us. We lost because there are a lot of rules around design build. We weren't local. There were just a lot of issues around it. Um, but he actually asked me to come work for him. Like he was like, I really would like for and this was when I was like, I am actually like an entrepreneur. Like I can't work for anybody. That's not gonna work for me. Um, but I do know the people at Integris. If you ever want
Yeah.
that intro, let me know.
Mhm.
But and
And
Brian actually recently retired, so I don't have him as a connection, but still there are lots of people there that I know.
my
Uh,
mentor for Capstone, he's one of like the head designers at Integris right now, or
oh,
he's
who is it?
Jason Bond.
Oh, I don't. Jason?
I
I don't think I know Jason.
he's in Spokane.
Okay. Oh yeah, yeah. I know the Seattle team. The only person I know in Spokane is their marketing person. I think she lives there. But okay. Cool. Well, that's good. That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
funny. I mean, ultimately it's going to happen when, that's kind of the same industry.
Yeah.
So, um, let's see what else. Okay, what aspects of architectural education do you think need to evolve to better prepare students for the industry's future?
I mean, everybody has their own opinion. There's stuff like that
Sure.
where,
Well, you have a right
like,
to yours.
yeah,
Yeah.
everybody's like, "Oh, we need more this and that." But I think it would be really fun if they made us just actually build something. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, go outside and build a tiny home. Like, here's your hammer.
A
Here,
hundred percent.
yeah, and because we get taught to do how to use a shop, so we have like a specific shop, and we get told how to do like joinery, like all this information, but we've never done it,
Yeah.
unless you go out and buy all this stuff yourself. But I truly think that if they just were like, go build something like to scale, then we could actually learn something. Because Paul, you meet all these contractors, or at least I have, and all of them are just like, I hate architects. They don't know what's going on.
That's right.
As
They
far as,
do.
yeah, that's all I hear. And when I first started telling people I was getting into architecture, a lot of my dad's friends were contractors.
Mm-hmm.
They just were like,
Yeah.
"You guys are so dumb." And I'm like, "What?"
Okay, no, right?
It's one of those things where it's like we need to start looking about like how it affects us and our requirements, like how to communicate those better. But
Yeah.
at the same time, like if they just made us go build something, like maybe our empathy would change, maybe how we deal with certain people would change.
Mm.
It would be very nice, especially to put that in school, kind of force people through that experience.
Yeah, that's such a great idea. I mean, yeah, nice. Nice thought. Like for sure. And it seems so like common sense kind of, you know what I mean? Like maybe we should actually do this. You're familiar with design build. I mean, it's kind of that. Like it really is, you know, and I mean, I guess you could say I kind of drink the design build Kool-Aid a little bit. Like I do think that um, it just makes more sense the way that the way that the delivery method is just like, okay, like why would we do it like
Yeah.
this, from the beginning? But I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to any of the other podcasts that I've done, but the first one you did.
I can't remember his name, but I did watch one of them.
Okay, and so was it Chris Angus from Unico or Kevin Sauer?
I think it was Chris.
Okay, so
Really bad with the names.
the guy, oh no, it's totally fine. But one of the things that he was talking about, it was the very first one that I did, and he's a developer, and like he was talking about how we should have more business classes for you guys too. Like how important, like just an all-encompassing kind of like here's development in general, and here are all of the different perspectives that like we have that make a building happen, and architecture is one of them, and obviously a very important one, but only one. And so like understanding kind of that bigger picture. And I think in some ways that's what you're saying too, is like let's actually build a building, like so that we understand all the things that design can affect.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, great idea. um Okay, as you look at the changing nature of work and the rise of freelancing in architecture, how do you envision your own career path developing?
Yeah. A lot of architects I've talked to, they're they're very used to bouncing around. So it's very rare that you talk to an architect that's like, "Oh, I've been here for 40 years."
Right.
So I already have the mentality where it's like there's something where it's like change, especially in like who I'm hired or who I'm hired by, or like if I'm trying to work towards like my own or something like that. It's just gonna be what it is, I feel. Like it's just one of those things where it's like you gotta take those opportunities and you gotta create more for yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm just ready to just start to get out there and just
Yeah.
see what happens because it's one of those things where it's like you can fail, but I mean only to the extent that you let yourself fail.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah. And oftentimes the failure is really like just the what propels you to the next thing,
Yeah.
you know. Um, for sure. That's good. Obviously think a lot about this with Idifico and what we want to accomplish. And I think the biggest, like I'm fully convinced that everyone is going to be a freelancer, and like in 50 years, like the way that we currently do work is totally going to change, right? And so how important it is to have mentors. And so one of the things that will build into the system is this idea of and I think a lot of people too have been pushed out of the industry early, and they still have so much to offer, but because we're such a cyclical industry and so project based, it's like there are no projects, you're fired. You know what I mean? Like there's, and so I think there's like a lot of hunger in people who are experienced to like give that to the next generation, but there's not really a way to do that if you're not in an organization. So that would be the hope, is like when we have someone come onto the platform that doesn't have a ton of experience, that like they're not only connected with projects, but they're also connected immediately with like mentors who are interested, and there's this give and take there. And so I think it could be interesting. So um what do you think are the most important qualities for architects to develop?
I mean, you got to be used to change,
Mm-hmm.
but you also got to be you got to be able to communicate with everybody.
Yeah.
So it kind of like I mean, we've been kind of talking about this the entire time. Like you have so many components just to do one job or one building, and you just got to be able to understand where everybody is coming from. And that
Yeah.
might just be like being able to like understand individuality, or like intersectionality, like something where it's more of like that person and that's why they're talking that way, or like this is what they're asked of, so that's why they're bringing that to the table. So it's just one of those things where it's like you just got to be open, like for
Hmm.
anything to happen, but also be ready to help facilitate in some sense where it's like for the good of what's occurring or what can
Yeah.
occur.
It sounds like you're saying like you have to constantly be like comfortable in ambiguity, like, but, and yet be able to like immediately like and succinctly communicate what you're hearing.
Yeah. It's architecture, like the only way designs work is if you can communicate them.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where it's like communication and understanding, like that's just the baseline. Like you need to be able to develop concepts, but that's something that makes you like an architect besides just somebody a part of the project.
Hmm.
But definitely you just gotta be there.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, I'm really proud of you. Really proud of you. You're doing amazing. I was so excited when I heard that you were pursuing this career. I mean, it's can be very, very rewarding. So, I'm excited. Of course, we sort of hopefully, we hope that you would go to UW, but if you're in Eugene, that's cool. We'll come visit you. We can talk about urban fabric there
Yeah.
too. Um, but yeah, and thank you so much for taking the time to kind of share your experience with us. And yeah, let's keep talking about it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody for coming. Let's wrap it up. Okay, end session.